When I think about hiring, I have to think about not hiring for my team, but hiring for the business. In EdTech especially, we are growing in a lot of directions in a lot of ways that are not always vertical. I have not really had a vertical career path, right? It's been this spider web of growth and skills. And so the reason I would bring other folks in is I wanted varied perspective on how this individual could potentially fit within my team and contribute there, but contribute to the business overall.
Welcome to Education Matters. I'm your host, Jason Buccheri. This episode is part of our Edtech series, conversations designed to give founders, operators, and education leaders a clearer view into how this space actually works. My guest today is Kelly Hines. Kelly is the Vice President and Chief of Staff at Discovery Education, where she works across executive leadership, product, and people teams to ensure strategy translates into action, aligning systems, processes, and culture to better serve educators and students at scale. What makes Kelly's perspective here particularly valuable is not only her current role, but where she started. She spent 15 years as a classroom teacher in North Carolina, working across grades 3 through 6, specializing in gifted education and earning national board certification. She also holds an MBA from the University of North Carolina and a master's degree in educational instructional media design from Wilkes University. And clearly, her experience is one that bridges both the instructional and the organizational sides of this work. Over the past decade, Kelly has moved across nearly every part of an EdTech organization, from building global educator communities to supporting large-scale district partnerships to leading organizational effectiveness, and now serving at the center of executive decision-making. I am fortunate enough to have worked alongside Kelly for a number of years and have learned a great deal from her about what it really means to serve the people and districts we worked with. In this conversation, we explore what that looks like from the inside. We talk about why EdTech sits at an intersection of two very different worlds and what gets lost when either side is misunderstood. Kelly shares what it takes to hire and retain talent in a space that demands both pedagogical understanding and business fluency, and why curiosity and adaptability matter more than any single aspect of one's background. We also get into where EdTech organizations struggle, particularly when they build without fully understanding school systems or overlook the day-to-day realities of teachers. Kelly offers a simple but powerful way to think about this work, aligning the needs of the buyer, the lived experience of the educator, and the long-term outcomes for the students. And eventually we turn our lens back on districts and discuss what it takes to move beyond purchasing tools towards building real partnerships that lead to meaningful implementation. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Kelly Hines. Kelly Hines, my friend, welcome to the podcast. Where do we find you today?
I am joining you today from beautiful Asheville, North Carolina, in the Blue Ridge Mountains of the United States.
Wonderful. Kel, so we've known each other for a long time, but maybe give some folks some insight into what you're up to these days.
Absolutely. So yes, we won't talk about how long that has been. It's always a bit of a mystery there. I think we'll just let that go. But I am Chief of Staff at Discovery Education. I am continuing to be a recovering educator. I don't think you can ever take an educator truly out of their heart, right, in the work that we do. But I am excited to get to give back to school communities around the globe every single day.
Well, that's awesome. And you are another one of my guests that really have a fascinating and, maybe I can phrase it, intricate background in how you've worked in many different facets of education over the years. But as always, I want to give the audience a sense of who Kelly Hines is as a person. So can you tell us where and when did you grow up?
I laughed when I was thinking about this question. So I will frame this as I grew up on the southeast coast of the United States, a little town called Wilmington, North Carolina, known for movie industry and beautiful beaches. The when I grew up is still TBD. That is a work in progress for me, for sure. But as my kids like to tell me, I started teaching, I'll just leave it at this. I started teaching last century, if that gives you any framework there.
So what was life like in Wilmington? How did you and your friends play growing up?
So there's a whole lot of beach involved, right? I was definitely part of the go outside until it's dark generation. If you're thirsty, drink from the fire hose generation. But I was a girl who loved bikes and books and Barbies and Legos, whatever it was I could get my hands on. But my default was definitely books and still is today. I'm a reader at heart. I might always have one in my ear or in my hand or on my phone as a constant companion.
Was that something you inherited from your family, from a teacher? How did you find a love of reading?
I think I had books in my hands from very early. We also had a limited number of televisions in my house, and of an age when there were a limited number of channels to start with, right? But it was go read a book, go find a book. And just found a space where I could learn new things. I am a consummate learner. I will take in any opportunity I can to learn something new. So books were an amazing vehicle for that, and a way to experience things that were not part of my everyday life, to get to know people and worlds. And I still carry that curiosity with me today.
So was going to college something that was kind of just always predetermined in your house? Like, Kelly, you're a good student, you're a reader, this is just what you should do? Or was there another path for you to get to college and to eventually become a teacher?
I think it was always in my path because I always knew I wanted to be a teacher, right? And that was the mechanism. Before the conversations around you need to go to college and figure out what you were going to do were never really a thing. It was, you're going to be a teacher. I actually had a university scholarship for a teaching scholarship. That was just something that I knew I wanted to be of service. I knew I wanted to do something that mattered. But it came back to that sense of, I just love learning. And I had teachers, I think we all have, right, who came close to dulling that sparkle a little bit for me. But I also had other teachers who were inspiring enough to oxygenate it, right, sustain it and energize it. And I knew that I had an opportunity to be that latter person for kids in other places.
So were you one of those special kids that like knew what you wanted to do real young? Like you just loved being in the classroom as a student and you're like, that's what I want to do when I'm older? Or did it kind of develop over time?
I always knew I wanted to be a teacher. Both of my parents were teachers. So I think in some ways it wasn't a sense of I was following in the family footsteps, but rather I think I actually walked in with the benefit of really understanding what it meant to be a teacher. And all of the pieces, emotional and heart-wrenching and hardworking, that come with all of that, but also the connection to the impact and the possibility that was there.
So I've always kind of known you as this teacher of teachers, right? I don't think I've actually asked you, or maybe it's been so long that I've forgotten. Where did you start teaching? Like what grade level, and how long did you do that for?
So I started teaching 5th grade. I taught for 15 years in North Carolina. I taught everywhere from grades 3 to 4, 5, and 6 in the classroom. I ended up getting certification to teach academically gifted students. and also moved quite a bit into teacher training, right? Which is how you started to get to know me. It was part of my transition out of the classroom and into the EdTech space, was this ability to connect well with educators, to think about their practice and expanding, opening possibilities for innovative approaches to meeting the needs of kids, and have some fun while you're doing it.
Yeah, actually, I'm really happy that you mentioned that, because it wasn't kind of in my thinking about this, but you've always made so much of the PD you've done with us and me as a witness to it just fun. I remember some of the laser activities that you've done and things like that. So were you centrally located, like centrally allocated at the district, or you were always made a teaching job and then did like additional teacher workshops and things like that?
I was always classroom based.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so from there, how did you find your way into EdTech?
So it's an interesting story, right? I always tell people I was having one of my best teaching years ever. And I had gotten involved a couple years earlier with the Discovery Educator Network, affectionately known as the DEN, is kind of one of the first truly EdTech communities facilitated by Discovery Education that connected educators from around the globe with each other to really think about how we can celebrate and elevate the work happening in classrooms. I was one of those teachers in a building who was constantly looking to try something new, try a new technology, find a new way. I was reinventing my lesson plans every day, every week, every year, because I had a new group of kids. If I was bored, of course they were going to be bored, right? But I didn't always find the support and encouragement in my own school building to do that. And what I found was in the Den was teachers from all over who had that same spirit of not only, yeah, you should try that, but how can I help you? What do you need? Can I share this with you? How can I help empower you? And in that work and getting that connectivity through the Den, I realized how powerful it was to also be that for other people, to have walked that journey and had my teaching life changed by the impact of community. And so this opportunity came to light with Discovery Education to help be part of a team to really think about how we can scale connection, support, and encouragement through empowering educators and that desire for impact, right? And that desire to make a difference in students' lives, educators' lives, and really in the lives of communities. I saw an opportunity to potentially even do that at a grander scale than I was doing 30 students at a time every year in my classroom. So I said, why not, right? And so much of my career in EdTech has been me saying, sure.
Why not?
I'll figure it out. I don't know how, but I will, right? Because I believe so deeply in the possibility of what I could do in the position.
We'll come back to some of that disposition that folks need to succeed in any career, but in particular in EdTech. But I want to linger a little longer on you and the community team, because that kind of, as you suggested, gave you access to not only more educators, but educators not only from across the United States, but in Canada and even further out. What was that like in building a community, and what did you perhaps learn there about teaching that surprised you, or that you may have not learned while you were in the classroom proper?
Such an interesting question, right? Because I don't know that I learned something brand new about teaching or learning, but I learned how not unique my personal experience was, right? And maybe that was the learning there, that often as an educator in a building, you can feel isolated from what's going on outside of your classroom, outside of your school. right? That it was an interesting lesson to continue to understand in new and different ways, universally, education systems are deeply complex. They are these wild webs of requirements, constraints, inputs, desired outcomes for kids that any one day that you wake up could change from what they were the day before, right? Whether that's budget constraints or governmental standards constraints. But universally, they are full of people who started in that work to do really good things for kids, right? So they're full of this combination of great intent and wild and weird things that we have to sort our way through in order to do that work. Those things and challenges are both global and super localized, even down to an individual school building within a larger district.
So, Kelly, this is part of the Edtech series that we've started to give folks kind of an all aspects or all scales of, starting up an Edtech company, from founders, early stage founders, to even folks that are running and parts of much larger Edtech organizations. One of the reasons, among many, that I wanted you on the show for a while now is that you've had such varied experience. You mentioned starting as a community team builder, but can you take us through the different roles that you've had? Because I want folks to get a sense of really that you have this really unique perspective and broad perspective of different roles within an Edtech organization. And then I want to ask you some questions about what insight you can give folks that are maybe earlier in their careers or earlier in the founding of their companies.
Oh, it's quite an interesting journey, right? In the work, I have regularly said in my nearly 12 years in EdTech that, wow, those words that just came out of my mouth are words that I never imagined. Like fifth grade teacher Kelly could never have imagined that she would be saying or knowing or using in the work. And if you had told fifth grade teacher Kelly in April of 2014 that she would be doing what she does today or many of the things along my journey, I may not have said yes to that first job in EdTech because I couldn't have imagined where it could have taken me, right? So when I started at Discovery Education, I was actually part of a regional sales team here in the United States with the specific focus on building community and elevating the work of community within that particular region. From there, I had the opportunity to start building a team where we were adding folks in other regions of our EdTech organization who got to do the same type of work that I was doing. There was a deep recognition that, man, when you really invest in educators as a critical stakeholder, as part of your buying process, as part of a usage process, then not only are you doing really great work for educators and students, you're doing good work for your business as well, right? Important insights and important opportunities to continue to scale and grow. From there, I took kind of those learnings into helping to lead what was then called our channel success team. So as many of you know, channel partners are those that work functionally as resellers and partners. Here in the United States, we have several organizations that are state level entities that work in that channel type experience that work through our local and state government organization as buyers and supporters of all types of resources, not just EdTech, for their schools. So I co-led that team, really thinking about how do we start expanding a model that goes beyond just teacher by teacher, but empowering other partners with us to focus on the importance of building scale as well. From there, I moved into a role where I was supporting our partner success team overall. So this is the team that focused where Jay and I got to spend a lot of time together, focused on serving our largest partners across the United States and Canada. I had a broad team that allowed the work that we did to say, great, you are a partner of Discovery Education. What does good look like for you? What does the power of leveraging the resources and products that we offer? How do we do that together and in partnership with you as a school district to deliver on the outcomes you're hoping to take from there? Here's the one I get a lot of disbelief around. I moved from leading that team into an HR role. And folks said, Kelly, you left sales to go to HR. I get a lot of quizzical head tilts when I get asked about that. And what I realized in the work that I was doing with partner success was I was really good at and loved building teams, building strong teams who worked well together, aligned around a mission to deliver on good work, who cared about each other, who worked together in service of our partners and of the business. And I just recently have been having that connection that's really what I did as an educator. It's what I did in building community. I've taken this thread of growing and building community more broadly through our organization to help extend our impact. So for the last several years, I have led our organizational effectiveness and people experience work as part of our HR team, really thinking about every day, how do I make sure that the experiences that our employees at Discovery Education are having make DE a place where people want to come, where they want to grow, where they want to stay, and where they want to use their talents to make a difference out in the world. And then another kind of turn, right? In December of just this last year, I moved into our chief of staff role here at DE. So I have the opportunity to really work closely with our executive team and strategic work across the organization to continue to make sure that we are accelerating, delivering on our mission for our school partners around the globe.
Well, that's awesome. And kudos to the senior leadership team to effectively just put you at the center of everything that's happening at this. I approve of this move. As you know, I've always have of your different moves throughout the organization. So something I haven't asked any of the guests because quite frankly, they haven't had this breadth of experience nor this specificity in the HR role. But I know this is something that's always been a challenge, always is a challenge in general. But then in particular, there's different nuances in Edtech that are different, I think, than every other industry. Can you give the folks a sense of what are some of the greatest challenges when it comes to hiring and retaining in the Edtech community? And then a follow-up to that is, how should folks think about hiring folks for this specific industry, this specific role, or what have you?
It's such a great question, right? Because EdTech is such a niche environment. It's not education. It's not technology, but it's also not either one of those things, right? So the biggest challenge is that EdTech companies are really looking for a true unicorn, right? In this space, which then breeds competition for unicorn talent. And what do I mean by unicorn talent, right? Unicorn talent are people who are open to and understand both learning, science, and pedagogy, along with product knowledge, modern tech stacks, an understanding of how government spending works. And that is one of the biggest challenges that folks in the EdTech that's different than other SaaS type companies are dealing in. Anyone, whether it's education or other areas of government, working and selling with government buyers is its own challenge in and of itself. It has its own rules and regulations, right? And then underlying across that continues to be a connection to the mission and the why of why you're doing the work.
What are the key skill sets or dispositions that you look to when hiring for, let's even maybe narrow this down a bit to business development roles or key partnership roles? Do you like look for an educator that really knows the space really well, and then you guys are happy to train them on the more business development side? Or do you look for somebody on the business development side and then try to teach them about the world of education? Or neither of those? Maybe you have a different approach.
Hey, you're not going to like this answer because I'm not going to definitively say a this or that, right? I would say I've seen both be really successful. And so I don't have a preference, right? It's really about the individual and a readiness and an openness of learning that this is the same and different than what you've done before, right? I'm looking for change agility, an understanding and ability to embrace that they have to learn about the other thing. The things that you applied as an educator, you can use some of them, and you have to be willing to learn and do other things, right? Recognizing that you are not working for a school or a school district or a not-for-profit entity. You have to learn about the business so that you can extend your influence. And folks who are not traditionally from education have to be open to understanding that the edtech world is not like a sales role or work. You can't run the same playbooks. You think about things like sales cycles, especially in larger districts, are 12 to 18 months, right? There's nowhere else that any other SaaS company would say a 12 to 18 month sales cycle. Like, that's not a thing, right? So you have to be willing to see through both sides and beyond like accept that it is, embrace that that's what makes it unique and special. I think different levels of roles, different types of things you mentioned, things like BDRs or account executives. But if you're working in an ed tech company, whether you're in finance or HR or technology, you've got to be able to flex in and out and understand both sides of the world.
So can you take the listeners under the hood a little bit? Like, how do you try to identify somebody that's coming in that is a willing and open learner and a true learner? Like, I imagine from the application side, that's extraordinarily tough to do, but maybe there's some tips and hints you can give folks as to how they can stand out there. And then I'll ask you a question about interviewing and talking to such folks.
So I am looking for folks, obviously, every now and then you come across a unicorn, someone who has been in ed tech or has experience in both of those areas. But ultimately, I'm looking for people who can demonstrate an ability to apply their skills in a variety of contexts. Right? If you think about what I did as a fifth grade teacher was stakeholder management all day, every day, right? I delivered on outcomes. I could see how the work that I was doing could be applied and thought differently without a one-to-one type of translation there. I'm always curious to see, how are people showing that they are curious? Right? Are they exploring a variety of different certifications and learnings across a whole bunch of stuff? Because it's that willingness to learn, try new things. I love hearing what people are reading, how they are taking the time to learn about different areas of life in general, right? Because that spirit of curiosity extends beyond just, I only want them to be curious about business or curious about education. Ultimately, I think this idea of people showing that they're change agile, that they are authentically connected to the why of the work, right? Why edtech? Why this space? And then I look for an element of, frankly, vulnerability. I think a good team is really built around the idea of authentic connection. that doesn't mean culture fit, right? Like, oh, they're like me. They have the same mindset as me. In fact, I push back on people to say, if you have too many of you, that's all you're ever going to have, right? And one of the great questions that I think I used to ask, and maybe this is skipping to interviewing, but like, what is your special sauce? When I was looking for a new team member, when I had an opening come up for whatever reason, I'd have to assess my team really deeply and go, what is a topic that my team does not know enough about, me included? And where can I find somebody who may not have all the other things, but they can bring some experience? Maybe it's grant writing and government affairs. I'm like, man, if my team knew more about that, we would level up as a team. So thinking about skills and dispositions, what is the special sauce that collectively helps to rise us as a team, will rise our organization and our ability to serve our schools.
So now if we turn to that interviewing piece proper, I was witness and part of this. I thought something that you did that always stuck with me, and I've thought about it when hiring folks and connecting with folks in the work that I'm doing today, is you asked me to sit in on a number of interviews, and I'm like completely removed from that function of your business, from the folks you were hiring to. I mean, we worked interconnectedly. And when I asked you, like, why do you want? No, just sit in, give me a vibe check, ask some questions. And it was really exciting for me as my role to do something different, to actually be part of that process. So, because it's certainly, I know there's a lot of books written about this, but it's definitely, I think, more an art than a science, really trying to, in a short period of time, understand how this person will fit with the team. So have you continued to do things like that? And what other kind of tips and tricks might you have for folks as to how you really try to get a sense of who the person is that you're about to hire?
I love that question. And I love that you still remember that, right? I think when I talk to candidates who have been through that process with me, that's something they often mention. When I think about hiring, I have to think about not hiring for my team, but hiring for the business. In Edtech especially, we are growing in a lot of directions, in a lot of ways that are not always vertical. We talked about my career path at Discovery. I have not really had a vertical career path, right? It's been this spider web of growth and skills. And so the reason I would bring other folks in is I wanted varied perspective on how this individual could potentially fit within my team and contribute there, but contribute to the business overall. You mentioned interconnectedness, right? Nobody in EdTech is working in isolation, locked in their room, only talking to the people on their individual team. How they work with others to move along key initiatives, identify pain points. In the partner success world, they've got to be able to listen and understand what someone in a partnership space is saying and hearing and translate that to the work that we did. So getting cross-departmental feedback on candidates helps you see your own blind spots, helps you see potentially great potential in candidates that you hadn't even thought of. Things come up in conversation with people on other teams that unlock understanding about why someone might be a great fit within your organization. So that's one. And a question I always loved. And, in our work that we do, we're often in front of customers or in front of partners. We're presenting on our resources. And a lot of people say, I want you to get familiar with our product. And I want you to do a 2-minute pitch on our product. As part of that, I want to hear how you would do it. In reality, they don't know enough about your product to authentically communicate in the way that you really want to see. Because what I want when they're in front of a partner is connection and authenticity. I want to show how they are good. I want to see how they're going to show up when they're truly deeply excited about what it is that they're sharing. But I still need to see their presentation skills, right? Because that is something that's really important. So I would ask team members in a candidate status to prepare a 5-minute presentation on any topic of their choice. And it was one of my favorite things that we did, because I had presentations on things like why Terminator 2 is an allegory for life. I had presentations.
More so now in the age of AI than ever.
Right?
So that was spot on.
Now, and here's what, and that person absolutely got the job, and they are still at DE, and they are growing and thriving, because we saw in that moment, like, how do you really connect with people, right? Because he was trying to bring me along this journey that I hadn't even seen Terminator 2. So it was almost the best replication of what an authentic sales conversation could look and feel like, because he was selling me on this hypothesis and life belief that he had. And he hooked me to go and watch the movie. And I thought, man, if you can bring me along that journey about this topic and you are excited to be here, imagine what that's going to look and feel like when you're excited about our organization's products and services. Like I can get you the sales enablement. I can't teach you to authentically connect and be passionate.
Well, I think that's a real cool example, because you also take the pressure off of them of trying to pretend that they know as much as you do about an industry that you've been learning in for 12 years, right? So you kind of remove that context, because the work will teach them all that they need to know. So that's really cool. So 2 questions, Kelly, before we do some fun wrap-up questions. One for the Edtech founder / more mature company. You can kind of answer this in whatever way you'd like. What are the common mistakes that Edtech organizations make? Like, is it they focus too much on product? They develop too much in a silo without connecting with, educators on the ground. They don't spend enough time in organizations. And you don't have to take up any of that. But what I want to give them is a true sense of, like, if you can distill your, years of expertise in all these different areas in Edtech, what kind of advice, strong advice, would you give to them in terms of where they're spending their capital and their energy?
I love this question, right? And so if there were a couple things, I would underscore the importance of truly listening to understand. And understanding that the problems that we are helping schools, educators, communities solve are complex and systemic. So we have to remove a belief that whatever product we are going to put forward is going to solve all the things, right? No matter how great your product is. Because these things are complex and systemic, and there are humans involved, we have to really listen and understand what those needs are. And there's 3 pillars to this that are super critical. One, we have to figure out how to bridge the needs of your buyer. If your buyer is a school district, they have specific things that they have to check off in order to buy this product, whether it's standards alignment, funding constraints, all of those areas, right? There are things that they have to see from an efficacy standpoint, from an impact standpoint. So we have to understand that work. But then we have to understand the realities of a user. If your primary user is educators, how long does it take to implement this? What is the reality of what this looks like against all the other things stacked up that are required of that educator to use? So we have to understand the teacher experience in a true, authentic, and open way. And then ultimately, what are the desired outcomes of the student? And what do we want for kids in reality and in the long range? And I don't just mean what do you want for the students in your schools that you're serving? What do you want for your own kid when it comes out of their learning experience? I used to put every year we'd have teachers, especially with my youngest. I have 3 boys. We are all boy all the time at my house. But particularly with my youngest, every year the teachers would ask on their beginning of the year survey, what do you want your kid to get out of this year? What does success look like for you this year? And I had reached a point where my answer for my youngest in particular is and continues to be, he's a freshman in high school. I want my kid to love school at the end of the year. Because that disposition of loving learning in the world of change that we are in today is what will give him a future. It will future-proof him. Being learning agile, to love learning, and to want to keep doing. Right? So as we are leading in EdTech work and being partners with schools and school districts, truly understanding what their challenges are, recognizing that they are systemic and complex, but really being locked in on how do I make this product bridge what my buyers need, meet the realities of what teachers have, and continue to foster engagement and love of learning for kids, we're going to be in good shape.
Awesome. Now, if I can ask you the question from the other side.
Okay.
And we're going to be EdTech agnostic, so it doesn't matter the organization or the product or what niche they're fitting into. But from the district side, from the senior leadership side, what do you wish they knew more intimately about the EdTech world that, just given our experience, they might not know?
I love this question, right? Because it's really about what does product plus partnership look like between a school district and your product, right? Your EdTech company. No product can likely just be dropped into a school district and be immediately effective. We are entering, when we enter a contract like that, we are entering into a relationship, right? It is why we at Discovery Education deeply use the word and commit to the word partner in this work, right? And when I see tools implemented effectively and to build continuity and depth and impact, the most success comes when a school district really sits down and leans heavily into how are we going to roll this out? What is the message? How are we preparing the educators for this shift, this change, and this understanding of what this work looks like? When a new tool comes in, school districts can be so helpful for educators to help them say, and not only is this new thing here for you, here's why, here's what we hope it will accomplish, and here's how we envision it fitting within the ecosystem of all of the tools that you have today. And when you can partner together as a district and an EdTech company to help frame that work for the realities of teachers. And I had a great principal about midway through my teaching career who used to always ask, but what does that look like, Kelly? Right? And so, awesome. We have made this decision to go forward into this work together. What does that look like for a teacher, for a student, and even for a district representative? And what does that look like? What do you need from us as an EdTech company to help make sure that we're delivering on this promise together so that we're coming out with the same expectations as well as the same ability to affect change, which is probably why you decided on that purchase in the first place.
Yeah, I love that answer because we've seen it where we've spent so much time in the pre-sales, in the piece that you mentioned earlier, connecting with educators, understanding their realities, and then the decisions made, and then the senior leadership or the implementation teams or the PD teams kind of think, okay, well, it's done. Now it's going to go do its thing. And the reality is that they need to be continually involved and working as partners. So I love that. Kelly, my penultimate question is always, if you had a magic wand with all that you know about the education systems across the globe, the EdTech world, what would you do to public education?
So I have 2 things. One, I would give teachers ample planning time. Teachers should not have to go home to get all the work done that they couldn't do at school. They need time to be creative. They need time to be collaborative. They need time to grade their papers and give authentic feedback thoughtfully during their working day. So that is one. I would make sure teachers have more time to plan thoughtful lessons for their students, implement those. I'm going to skip pay teachers more because that's universally known. I'm not debating it. The other thing that I would do with my magic wand is mandate recess for every student all the way through high school. We need to have fun. We need brain breaks. We need to remember that we are kids. We need to get outside. I remember so deeply, Jason, we were working with one of our school partners out in Vancouver, and they used to do an all-day outside day, right? That they were not allowed to come inside for an entire day, every lesson, every recess, every lunch. Regardless of the weather, they will make it work from an outside day, all day. And I just think, man, how much joy would kids have if they knew they had times during the day to continue to authentically connect? I used to play, football with my kids during recess to see their teachers differently, to kind of just breathe in the joy of the space to help them in their work.
That's fantastic. My last question, Kelly, is always, what book as a reader, what book, movie, podcast, album, or in all of the above would you recommend to the audience?
Okay. So I am not a podcast album person, except yours, of course, Jay. I'm pretty minimal in that space because I love a book. So I'm going to take two books. So I just recently finished The Finest Hotel in Kabul, which is a people's history of Afghanistan. And it's written by Lise Doucette, who was the BBC chief international correspondent. And it channels the history kind of since the mid-60s, 1960s, I guess I should say these days, of what started as the Intercontinental Hotel in Kabul. And kind of chronicles over time how the individuals who worked in that building kind of were experiencing all of the different political and regime changes that were happening. It is a fascinating insight into that time in the world. I will add to that, I'm a firm believer in Silly as well. So one of my favorite series that I recommend to everyone is a series by Hannah Nicole Mayer. The first book in the series is called The Assistant to the Villain. It is hilarious, has strong female characters in it, a whole lot of sarcasm and nonsense as part of it. And I love sarcasm and nonsense, as you well know. So it is just a joyful, silly series of books that are fun to read and laugh at and giggle at along the way.
Well, I'm going to definitely check that out. I love that title. Kelly Hines, my friend, thank you very much for this.
It has been so much fun. I appreciate you reaching out.
This podcast is recorded on the territory and Treaty 13 lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and on the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat and the Haudenosaunee. The show is edited and produced by the marvelous and talented Andrew Mastroianni. If you like what you're hearing, make sure you subscribe to us on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast. Until next time, remember, there's absolutely no inevitability as long as there's a willingness to contemplate what's happening. I'm your host, Jason Buccheri. Until next time.